But thank you so much for all your contributions in the music industry. Uh,
Wow, you keep trying.
well, back in the day, I interviewed you uh, backstage of the Warped Tour for Campus Circle. And one thing I really admired is that uh, you were just so down to earth. And I think that just the feeling of camaraderie on that tour with all the different bands and like the cookouts and everything really, I don't know, I just think it was like a favorite tour for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it was. That's how you kind of normalize things. You tried to show people that you were working hard to give people joy during the summertime, but you had to have kind of those moments yourself. So that's what the barbecues were really about. Was kind of to put everyone in, like everyone was equal. There was no headliners. The people that set up the tents, the sponsor, everyone would gather in this point to share the highs and lows of each day. And that's what I always said on Warped Tour. You never knew if it was going to be someone's best day and someone's worst day. And you never knew who that was going to be on any given day. But the rest of the team would pull you up to get you to the next day because you might have the best day the next day.
Oh, well, that is actually a really good mental health thing, especially with bands on tour, because, it's a grueling life. And now you're involved in the 320 Festival, which is all about music and mental health. But what is it about being involved in this festival and producing it that has really been personal for you?
Well, it was when Talinda Bennington came and approached me, that Chester, she wanted to do something in his legacy. And, we'd crossed paths a bit, and Lincoln Park did play a Warped Tour date one time. And he was just he was a nice gentleman every time I'd ever have contact with him, but obviously he was hurting very bad inside, and, he didn't make it through, and looking at the generation of artists that I kind of rose up with, I think a lot of them were suffering from mental health issues, and we didn't really know how to deal with it. I mean, it was, we lost Chris Cornell, Layne Stanley, we lost Scott Weiland, and, those people were all very close to me. I knew all of them pretty well from the beginnings of their career. And, we've tried, and Warped Tour was a special place. And, I knew I was winding that down when Talinda approached me about a year ago. I knew that it was going to, so it would be a shame to kind of just cut it off and not take some of those positives that I thought we did on Warped Tour. We worked with artists. We were willing to help artists. We traveled with counselors on the road to help people through rough days and rough times in their lives. There was a place to be helped. So this was just an extension. So her coming into, right when I said it was a natural fit for me to step in and help out and do this.
Yeah, that's, all the things that you're talking about that you did on Warped Tour, such as counselors and like making everyone feel like they're at the same level, no matter where they were in their career as a band. We're all like, it sounds kind of groundbreaking, it's not often that you hear about that. I mean, can you explain first, like, the difficulties of being on the road and the kind of things that you came across?
Well, the thing was, I lived through them. The interesting thing, I lived having to leave your home with your wife, with your young children, and the separation. And, sometimes everyone thinks it's just a great big party out there, and you're working really hard, and there's the stresses of home. So you're trying to balance, home life. I say so quite often in relationships, whether it's, a loved one or a loved one, and you're trying to make everything work, and it's really difficult. So the stress is because a lot of times you're out working on the road because that helps your family at home, whether you're male or female, and you're trying to help, and there's those pressures at home, and you're always on a slight disconnect, and that slight disconnect the gap gets pretty big out there the longer you're on the road. Artists are also on the road longer now. We tend to go from tour to tour to tour. When I started out in this business, you might be touring 2 to 3 months a year. Now you have a lot of bands who are out there 8, 9, 10 months a year by the time they do their world tours and everything. So those little stressors, no sleep, different time zones, strange diets all the time, the highs and lows, the adrenaline rush of the show and the low afterwards. It does take its toll, and you don't have that recovery time as much in a lot of ways. And that can go for the crews, and that's as well as the band members. The crews are out there working all the time now. If you're a good top crew person, you could be on the road 10, 11 months a year, if not more. And and you may not think that it's taking a toll, but eventually it does. The lifestyle takes a toll. So that's what we try to do. Was in that Warped Tour where we had a little bit. I had those bands for 8 to 9 weeks, sometimes 7, 8, 9 weeks. That we would try to break up that routine a little bit and give them outlets, and try to bring back some normalcy even on the road to their lives.
Well, what are some of the things, like if you look now at how touring is done, what are some of the changes that you think should be implemented as far as, having mental health be, part of the equation?
Well, I think, we're slowly, people are recognizing that we have to take care of our artists and our crew people. They're not expendable. If they burn out, and can't do this, who's going to fill these venues for the next 10 and 20 years? I think it's also okay that the stigma's coming off a little bit, where you can say, hey, I'm having a problem. And if you say, it's okay, we can get you someone to talk to. Organizations now in the mental health, where Music Cares was always really good, but a lot of their stuff was about addiction at first, the way they would get involved with an artist. But that addiction many times comes from having mental health issues to ease your own pain.
Yeah, some of the musicians that I've interviewed for the podcast have talked about their addictions. And, it's easy, I think, maybe even a little easier in the mental health, in the music industry, to either take drugs or alcohol to kind of numb the pain. But on the flip side, after they actually dealt with the issues that were causing the mood disorder, they said, I lost so many years of my life, in the midst of an addiction. And it seems almost like as if having an addiction would be, I don't want to say an easier path, but it's been the path for some musicians, whereas actually dealing with the issues and talking about it, it sounds simple, but it hasn't been the easiest.
Oh yeah, if you choose a vice and you're on the road, it's readily accessible. It's not too hard to find whatever that vice is. If the vice is drinking, drugs, women, whatever, it's not hard to find and to settle the short-term need without dealing with the long-term problem. So it takes some strength sometimes to say, I have an issue that needs to be done. But seeing artists, high-profile artists like James Hetfield, who just said, no, they had a huge tour going out this summer. Now, COVID would have probably affected it in some way, but for him to say, no, I'm not in the right space to go out, he might inspire some of the younger artists to be willing to say that and be willing to step up and do that. We've lost a lot of artists that were struggling, and it was interesting that they were struggling and maybe they were getting short-term help, but they were going right back out on the road. They were going right back into what possibly got them there in the first place. And you look at it now, and some of the drugs that are being used and things like that, you can't just go into a 30-day rehab and think you're okay. We're talking, it takes 8 to 10 months to reprogram the brain enough to kind of semi-function in a normal setting and be able to tackle this. But it's the short term. So I think we're starting to address it. I think managers are starting to address it. I think some of these things of liability now may be falling on some of the managers or the people, the touring personnel, if they're not addressing it with the artist, if that makes them complacent in the situation. So I think, we're on the right track. Do we have a long way to go? Absolutely. We always do.
Yeah. So it's a lot of it is really just taking the time to take care of yourself. kind of looking at more as a marathon, right, as versus a sprint, especially with touring. And I do respect the artists that sometimes have to stop tour to take care of themselves, whether it's rehab or some kind of recovery, because there is a lot of stress out there. And sometimes, I don't know, and then just in general, musicians' career can be so up and down. And being away from your family, whether you're on tour or any kind of career, when you're away from the people that you love, that's also, a mental mental anguish. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the 320 Festival, I see it evolving, and now it's online, and it's multiple days, which I think is incredible. What is it about the 320 Festival that you feel is different from all the other festivals that you produce?
Well, it's very much focused on the education and philanthropic side. Now, music is blending into it and supporting it, but it's very, very panel focused and speaker focused through this time. It's it was something that was going to be more of an educational conference, and we were going to be having it it was going to be like a Warped Tour with a lot of activities. It was going to have film fests and roundtables and booths and music, and there was going to be a lot going on all in one day. And then when this came along, we had to pivot online because it's also being co-produced by many of my students at USC who are co-producing it.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so it was great. It was important to show them that we could pivot and that we adjust, and we instead of just giving up. So it's I think in some ways it's been a great learning experience. Trust me, we've learned a lot by putting this together.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, the coronavirus has kind of had everybody had to turn on a dime, right? And completely rethink the way we do things. I mean, what has been the biggest struggle for you during this pandemic, whether it's personal or career-wise, and how did you get through that?
Well, for me, I've been fortunate that I have this full-time teaching job now, which I'll be teaching a class right after I talk to you. So it has been kind of a distraction, and it has been something to occupy my time, because right when this hit, it was the short term with so many of our friends, so many crew people. So the short term people were out of work. They were all excited about getting back to work. It hit probably at the worst time for a touring crew professional person that lives this kind of lifestyle, because it hit at the end, in March, right as we were heading into what we would call the beginning of festival season for many people. Yeah. And it's very, very busy for bands, sound companies, staging companies, crew people. This is when they're kind of at the end of their money. They've kind of gotten through the winter time. That January, February could be a little bit slow. March, you start to do a little bit more work, and it's usually full on from April through October or Thanksgiving now, even. So financially, recognizing so many of my friends were hurting, watching the industry kind of rise up and doing what we can all do and helping where we can. Now I think it's just the long term. Sometimes if you pay attention and you look at all this and just the mismanagement by our government to this pandemic, it really weighs on you, and watching the divisiveness of this country and how at a time like this, you do see very kind people doing kind things. Like our neighborhood had a concert where a pianist played and some jazz people played on a front lawn the other night, and people are putting plants out in their driveway. So you're seeing that really kind side, and you wish that the press would maybe highlight that a bit more instead of these people down protesting, breaking quarantine, doing this kind of thing. So it's causing a lot of mental anguish because you're seeing this, but you're trying to follow the rules. And I think we're all torn as a society right now. And it's I think the media is mishandling it. I think the government's mishandling it. And, in some ways, I think that if they had let a lot of music, rock and roll, roadie production people handle this, we would have had a good handle on it if we had the resources. We would have pulled together. We would have been okay.
I agree. I agree. I feel like the camaraderie in the music industry is really strong, and there definitely is like a family feel, to the music industry. Um, I went to the presentation at USC, uh,
Mhm.
and that was wonderful because you had people speak on mental health, but you also had people like Justin Furstenfeld of Blue October do his performance, which sort of mixed music and his story.
Yeah.
I thought that was really different. But I've seen on the lineup, you've gotten more people kind of jump on to this festival, which is really exciting.
Yeah, they're really jumping on right now, and to be honest, we're kind of putting a kibosh like as of this afternoon.
Mhm.
We have to finalize this. It's been a huge amount of work, which we don't mind, but it's time to lock in what we have and go with it. It's a lot of planning, and when you had a call with Google, and in the middle of the meeting, the people at Google said, "You guys have taken on a lot here." So if Google's saying we took on a lot, I guess but that's what I believe, that it's we'll do the best we can, and hopefully some people will watch it and pick up something, and if we can help someone through a rough time, then all the better.
Yeah, and one thing with the podcast is not only kind of trying to normalize the conversation, but encouraging people to get help and kind of making that as a sign of strength because when you're really struggling, sometimes it's hard to even to have the energy to take that step to either ask for help or to find help and try different ways to get help because there's so many solutions. And but I think people need to know about them, you know
Yeah.
uh, I mean, I noticed that you had people like Alexakis of Everclear, and I mentioned Blue October, and I just talked to Frank Zemo of Sum 41, who's going to be featured. But then I noticed you have Chris Martin of Coldplay, and you had Duff McKagan of Guns N' Roses, and
Yeah.
that was something I think that was new to the lineup.
Yeah, we added that in just recently, and that's great. And it's been through a lot of Talinda's connections, my connections, us reaching out, other people hearing about it. So I think it's a very diverse lineup, and I think some people have some really cool performances planned for the event.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Uh, well, when you think of mental health, there's depression, anxiety, there's panic attacks, there's all different kinds of disorders out there. And there was a study that was done called the 73% study that showed that musicians and creative people have a much higher tendency to go through these, throughout their life. Can you think of the first time when mental health, affected your life or, whether it's through your career or through a personal event?
Well, I think I take a lot. I have to internalize a lot on the road. Running the type of the events I do and things. And there's a couple points where maybe there was I was always a person that could push myself to a certain point, and maybe then sometimes that when you got home from the road that you needed to get it under control. If you're with your friends and you've drank your second bottle of wine before dessert hors d'oeuvres have come, you don't even realize it because you've just kind of built up this tolerance and stuff. But I think I've always been able to self check myself mostly, and learn when those triggers that might be pushing me to that point of breaking. And that's why people would always wonder why I would disappear on the days off and go out on a boat or a lake or something. I would separate myself from everyone to reground myself, and nature and outdoors has been my regrounding point. And I think at this point, even though I do have a beautiful backyard and it's nice here, I'm getting a little bit antsy to maybe get out and enjoy some natural environment. I'm starting to get that point where I'm not sleeping real well. So you start to understand your own triggers and your own things, and luckily I've been able to kind of manage those in life. But kind of goes back to 1995 a lot when I was touring a lot, and then with traveling with Brad Knoll from Sublime,
Hmm.
and not being able to recognize how severe his habit was that eventually killed him a few months later.
Yeah, one thing that Frank Zummo was talking about was, he had experiences not only with bandmates,
Yeah.
traveling with Scott Weiland and, of course, Chester Bennington, but, he had family members, and he said about confrontation, about that it's okay to confront somebody and have that discussion with them if you believe that, you know, they're going down a bad path, whether drugs, alcohol, sex, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I think we learn that, and that's what a lot of times by traveling with Frank or with Mike Farr, who would travel with Musicaires with us, and we had no issues if we saw someone maybe drifting out, drifting into a situation that maybe we'd been close to in our lives at some point. We learned through that. So had no problem if we thought it was maybe having minor interventions with people out on the road. And many people come back and thank us for that now, that we were willing to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I've talked to musicians who said, bandmates came up to me and said, you're not acting like you normally do, or, bringing up certain situations. And at the end of it all, even though it's a difficult process, they are thankful for it. But, through this whole 320 festival, I'm sure you've learned a lot about mental health and awareness. What's one thing that has stuck out to you that you've learned through all of this?
Well, that there are so many organizations out there and people who want to help, but maybe they don't gather like something like 320, where you're bringing people together and they're starting to trade ideas. So maybe nonprofits that have similar missions can now merge up and collaborate and help each other. And I've seen a lot of that coming out of 320 from people who have met through some of our phone calls or our meetings and things, and seeing them working on projects together, because I think it takes the whole community. And I think sometimes, just like we are in the music community, sometimes we're all heading in the same direction, but we don't realize we're right next to each other with the same goal. And I think 320 is about bringing people together in this space and showing that we're stronger as a community than as individual people within that community, even though we all have the same idea of making it a better world.
Yeah, I mean, I really applaud you for bringing in so many different nonprofits. A lot of them I've listed on my own website at checkoutpodcast.com, because it was amazing when I did the research how many free and low cost resources there were, and how many either physicians or counselors that were willing to reduce their price or negotiate a way so that somebody can get help.
Yeah, so it's that's I think that's the upside of 320. We've kind of shown that there's a lot of people out there, and that's what I found. There was a lot of resources. Sometimes you just don't know how to find them.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Is there anything else that you would like to say about the 320 festival?
I'm hoping that this will spawn other people to do other things similar to 320. And I've always liked to lead by example. And I think pulling this together, there's been a lot of great musical things out there in this crisis. But now I think we're blending in, like I like it, the philanthropy, the education, and the music into one weekend. 21 hours of programming. It's a lot going on, but I would have it no other way.
Well, I could tell that you feel really good about being involved in this project. And again, I applaud you for doing this. I just love the philanthropy part of your mission. And I saw you at NAMM when you were talking about Ikigai, which is the Japanese, it's the Japanese word for the reason you get up in the morning and your purpose.
Yeah.
And does that pretty much encompass what your purpose is in life at this point?
Absolutely. And my wife brought that up, Ikigai to me about a year ago. She read the book and gave it to me. And I really started looking at that and going, yes, this is what it is. This is my purpose, really.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it says that the 320 Festival is May 8th, 9th, and 10th. And you can listen to it on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, KNEX
Yeah.
.tv, and that is on Roku and Apple TV. And anything else?
Yeah, it'll live online and in eternity too. If you don't catch it live, you'll be able to find those panels because I think that's important. Some of the panels. It was great that when we did the thing at USC, it had over 200,000 views on Facebook. So it was great.
Wow. Well, that's great as far as continuing mental health wellness to, forever have that online.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Mari, and always nice to see you.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.